Welcome to Sonara's Deep Dive.
Close your eyes for a second. I want you to just strip away everything you think you know about how the universe began.
Okay.
Forget the Big Bang. Forget Eden. Forget the idea of a great void filled with light.
All of it gone.
I want you to imagine a kitchen. Or maybe it's a kind of celestial Italian bistro, existing somewhere outside of time and space.
Huh. I can almost smell that. It's a very vivid image.
Can you smell it? That scent of simmering marinara sauce, the sharp tang of Parmesan, that humidity you only get from boiling water?
It grounds the whole metaphysical idea in something. Well, something very domestic, doesn't it?
It really does.
Okay.
Because we're going all the way back
Yeah.
to the beginning. Before there was light, the sacred text tells us there was a mountain and a tree.
And a midget, I believe, is the term they use?
That is the term, yes, straight from the source. And hovering above it all, creating everything we know and see and feel, was an entity.
But not the one people might be expecting.
Not a man with a white beard sitting on a cloud, no. This entity was, well, it was vast. It was tangled. It was carbohydrates.
We are talking about the flying spaghetti monster.
The FSM. The noodly master.
The saucy deity.
Exactly. And the story goes, and you really have to stick with us here because this is from the core text we're diving into today. This act of creation, it wasn't precision operation.
No, not at all. It wasn't some grand, perfect architectural design carried out by an infallible engineer.
Why? Because the deity had been drinking.
Heavily.
From a beer volcano, no less, immediately before the event.
Which is, that's not just a funny detail. That is a critical foundational theological point in this entire belief system.
Right.
The literature on this often calls it unintelligent design.
Unintelligent design. I love that.
And the idea is that the world is just full of flaws, right? Disasters, imperfections, tectonic plates colliding. It's not because of some mysterious plan that we're too small to understand.
It's because the creator was, frankly, intoxicated during the process.
Completely drunk.
Born of culinary chaos. A universe that smells of marinara and Old Bay seasoning.
That's a good way to put it.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are peeling back the layers, or maybe draining the water off the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
Also known as Pastafarianism.
And our mission today is pretty specific. We aren't just here to, laugh at the memes or the pictures online, even though they are undeniably very funny.
They are. But there's more to it.
There is. We have a huge stack of sources in front of us. We've got academic papers on the sociology of religion. One is actually called the Noodly Nexus.
We have legal court rulings from the U.S. Federal Circuit, from the Netherlands, from Poland.
We've got interviews with the founder, Bobby Henderson, and of course the primary source itself, the Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
And we want to look past the most obvious symbol, which is the colanders on people's heads.
We do. We want to understand the cultural history, the surprisingly intense legal battles, and the genuine philosophical challenges this whole movement poses.
We're really framing this entire discussion through that lens of a kind of lost world of satire that somehow willed itself into reality.
Exactly. We're going to look at the origins, the rituals, the initiations,
Yeah.
in the modern revival.
Because the central tension here, the thing that we just kept seeing in every single one of these sources, is that one question.
Is this all just a joke?
Right. Is it an incredibly elaborate, long-running prank? Or is it a real religion, one that's actually testing the very boundaries of what we call faith and freedom in the 21st century?
That is the million-dollar question, or maybe the million meatball question.
Well, let's go with that.
So let's unpack it. We have to start where it all began. Part 1, origins, the prophet and the letter.
To really get the flying spaghetti monster, you have to get the context. You have to transport yourself back to 2005.
The era of,
Yeah.
what? Flip phones, MySpace, very, very baggy jeans.
Chuckles. That's the one. But more importantly, politically, it was really the height of the culture wars in America, specifically over science education.
And the setting is Kansas.
Kansas. The Kansas State Board of Education was in the middle of this huge nationally televised debate. They were getting ready to allow intelligent design to be taught in public school science classes.
Right, alongside evolutionary theory.
Exactly.
And maybe we should just quickly remind people what intelligent design, or ID, actually was. It was basically the argument that life is too complex to have happened by chance. So
yeah.
there must have been a designer.
Right, but they were so careful not to say God, weren't they?
So careful.
That was the whole legal strategy. They couldn't say God because of the Establishment Clause of the U.S. Constitution.
The separation of church and state.
Precisely. So they used these very vague terms like an intelligent designer. And the argument was, well, evolution is just a theory, so schools should teach the controversy.
Which is such a loaded phrase, teach the controversy.
Oh, it is. It implies there is a legitimate scientific controversy, which there wasn't. They wanted to present these alternative theories.
It was a classic wedge strategy, wasn't it? You just introduce a little bit of doubt about the established science, and then you offer this generic alternative that just so happens to look exactly like the creator from the book of Genesis.
It's a perfect description of it, and of course the scientific community was up in arms. But they were arguing with facts, fossils, genetics, geology.
And the Board of Education wasn't really listening to facts.
No, they were listening to rhetoric. And that's where the story pivots.
Enter our protagonist, a 24-year-old physics graduate named Bobby Henderson.
Who wasn't even in Kansas. I believe he was in Oregon at the time.
That's right. He's just sitting there watching this all unfold, and he spots a flaw in their logic. A massive, gaping, pasta-shaped hole.
He realized that the board had set a trap for themselves.
How so?
By arguing that an unspecified designer must be taught as a valid scientific alternative just because we don't know for sure.
Well, they had opened the door for any designer.
Any designer at all.
Any designer. So he writes an open letter to the Kansas School Board. And this letter, I've read it a few times now, and it is just a masterpiece of satire.
It really is. Because he doesn't get angry. He doesn't, scream about the scientific method or the Enlightenment.
No, he's so polite. He very politely, very earnestly demands that if they're going to teach intelligent design, they must also teach his specific belief.
Which is, of course, that the universe was created by a flying spaghetti monster.
He demands equal time. That's the key phrase, isn't it?
That's the whole thing.
He basically says, I completely agree with you. We should teach alternative theories. So let's teach 1/3 evolution, 1/3 intelligent design.
Then 1/3 Pastafarianism.
It's a classic rhetorical move. Yeah. Reductio ad absurdum.
Totally. He took their logic and just followed it all the way to the most ridiculous possible conclusion.
His argument was, you can't prove it wasn't a spaghetti monster.
And since the ID proponents themselves admitted they couldn't actually identify who the designer was, well, Henderson identified him.
And the details he includes in this first letter are they're incredible. This is where we get the first taste of the core theology. He introduces the concept of the noodly appendage.
Right, which is his way of addressing all the scientific evidence that contradicts his theory.
So, for example, a scientist might say, look, radiocarbon dating proves the Earth is millions and millions of years old. We can measure the decay of isotopes.
And Henderson's response through the letter is essentially, aha, that's just what the flying spaghetti monster wants you to think.
It's perfect.
It is. The theory states that the FSM is actively interfering with the scientific data, that he is there, invisible, undetectable, hovering over the researcher.
And just touching the atoms with his nuclear appendage to change the results.
Exactly, making the Earth look much older than it really is, purely to test the faith of Pastafarians.
It's so clever because it's a direct parody of the young Earth creationist arguments.
Specifically, the omphalos hypothesis from the 19th century.
Which was what, exactly?
The idea that God created the Earth recently, but with all the evidence of a past that never happened, he put the dinosaur bones in the ground already fossilized just to test our faith.
So Henderson just swapped out dinosaur bones for carbon-14 ratios.
He mirrored it perfectly. And what that does is it makes the claim completely unfalsifiable. You can't prove the FSM isn't doing that.
Just like you can't prove a generic designer didn't snap his fingers and create a fossil.
Right. It highlights the epistemic closure of that kind of argument. If you can just explain away any and all contradictory evidence as a test of faith, well, then evidence no longer matters at all.
He didn't stop there either. He also tackled gravity.
Oh, yeah, gravity.
In the letter, he argues that gravity isn't this physical force of attraction between masses.
No, it's the flying spaghetti monster pushing us down with his noodles.
Which, as he points out, explains why we all get a little bit shorter as we get older.
All that constant, gentle, noodly pressure.
He calls it intelligent falling.
Not gravity. Intelligent falling.
It creates this completely hermetically sealed logic. It's absurd, but it's consistent within its own rules.
So he writes this letter, he posts it on his website, thinking, maybe a few of his friends would get a chuckle out of it.
And instead, it just exploded.
It went viral before we really used that term in the same way. The sources say he received something like 60,000 emails.
60,000. And it was a mix, right? It wasn't all positive.
No, it was a mix, mostly supportive. A lot of scientists, teachers, academics who were so frustrated with the school board but didn't know how to fight the rhetoric.
They saw this and thought, yes, this is the perfect counter-argument.
But he also got a lot of hate mail.
Serious hate mail.
Yeah, people claiming he was mocking God, which, to be fair, he was definitely satirizing the concept of dogmatic belief trying to pass itself off as science.
Of course. But the genius was in the execution, the performance of it. He never broke character.
Never. He maintained this very calm, very reasonable tone of a concerned citizen who just wanted his own religion to be respected like everyone else's.
And that concerned citizen stance is what launched a global movement. But let's pause on that for a second. Every religion needs more than just a prophet and a founding document.
It needs a lineage.
It needs a history that stretches back into the mists of time. You need ancestors. You need a golden age to look back on.
And that brings us to part 2, the Sacred Order of Pirates.
This is one of my favorite parts of the entire lore. It's just so unexpected.
It is.
I mean, when you think of religious ancestors, you think of saints or apostles or, desert fathers meditating in caves.
Right. Prophets, disciples.
Pastafarians. They looked at pirates.
But, and this is a very important distinction, not the pirates from the history books. We are not talking about Blackbeard as a violent, cutthroat criminal.
Now, this is a very specific revisionist history.
Extremely revisionist. According to the Gospel of the Slying Spaghetti Monster, pirates were absolute divine beings. They were the original Pastafarians.
The sources describe them as peaceful explorers.
That's the term, yes.
They weren't criminals at all. That's just Christian misinformation that was spread during the Middle Ages to give them a bad name.
Apparently, the real pirates just went around the world giving candy to children.
They were missionaries of the noodly goodness.
Spreading the good word of the carb.
But again, like with the noodly appendage, this isn't just a funny backstory. It's not just a random detail. It serves a very specific philosophical and pedagogical purpose.
It's all about teaching the difference between correlation and causation.
Ah, the graph. We have to talk about the graph.
It's the centerpiece of Pastafarian apologetics.
It is. Henderson included a chart in his original letter to the school board.
A simple line graph. On the x-axis at the bottom, you have time, going back to the 1800s.
And on the y-axis, you have two different things being measured. One line is the number of pirates in the world.
The other line is the global average temperature.
And the data, when you plot it, is undeniable, as the number of pirates has steadily decreased since the 1800s.
Global temperatures have steadily increased.
Therefore, logically, the lack of pirates causes global warming.
It's airtight logic. If you accept the kind of logic used by the intelligent design movement, you absolutely have to accept this conclusion. The correlation is clear.
It's such a brilliant teaching tool. It shows so clearly that just because two things happen at the same time, like a decline in the pirate population and a rise in global temperature, it doesn't mean that one caused the other.
It was a direct jab at some of the very shaky data correlations that were being used by the ID camp to try and prove things like irreducible complexity.
But this dogma, this belief, it also had real-world consequences for the believers.
It did. Because of this core belief, wearing full pirate regalia became a form of religious dress.
And we see this come up later in the legal battles, don't we? If you are a fundamentalist Pastafarian, you might genuinely argue that wearing a pirate hat or an eye patch or carrying a cutlass is a necessary part of your faith.
It's a way to appease the FSM.
And perhaps to combat climate change.
It's a heavy burden to bear, wearing an eye patch to save the polar bears.
It's a heavy cross to bear. Or a heavy cutlass to carry, I suppose.
Precisely. And this connection to pirates, it gives the whole religion a very distinct aesthetic, doesn't it?
It really does. It moves it completely away from the solemnity of robes and vestments and incense.
And into the realm of the swashbuckling. It makes the initiation into the group fun. I mean, who doesn't want to dress up like a pirate?
So we have the creator, the FSM. We have the prophets, the pirates. Now, every religion needs a code of conduct, a set of rules. How are we supposed to live?
And this brings us to part 3. Rituals, ceremonies, and ethics.
In the Judeo-Christian tradition, you have the 10 Commandments. Very strict. Thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do this.
Very prescriptive.
The FSM, however, took a, shall we say, a slightly more relaxed approach to moral guidance.
The story goes that the pirate Captain Mosey, a very clear play on Moses, received 10 stone tablets from the FSM on top of Mount Salsa.
Mount Salsa.
But on his way down the mountain, being a pirate, he was maybe a little clumsy. Or maybe a bit tipsy.
And he dropped 2 of them.
Dropped them, shattered them. So instead of 10 commandments, humanity is left with the 8. I'd really rather you didn't.
Love that name.
It's so good. And according to the gospel, this explains why Pastafarian morals are admittedly a bit flimsy.
We're missing 20% of the moral code.
Exactly. It's not our fault. 2 of the tablets broke.
The tone of these commandments is what really gets me. They're not orders, they're polite requests. They're suggestions from a deity who seems to really want to avoid conflict.
The first one is a classic. It sets the stage for everything else. I'd really rather you didn't act like a sanctimonious, holier-than-thou ass when describing my noodly goodness.
That is a rule the entire world could probably use a little more of, right?
I would say so, yes. It immediately establishes the tone for the entire faith. Don't take yourself so seriously, and you certainly shouldn't use your faith as a weapon to harass other people.
It cuts right to the heart of religious hypocrisy.
It really does. Another one that stands out to me is number 6.
Let me see. Yes. I'd really rather you didn't build multi-million-dollar synagogues, churches, temples, mosques, shrines to my noodly goodness when the money could be better spent.
And then it gives a list of suggestions.
It does. Ending poverty, curing diseases, or living in peace, loving with passion, and lowering the cost of cable.
Lowering the cost of cable.
I think we can all say amen to that one.
It's about prioritizing the essentials of human well-being over institutional grandeur.
It's surprisingly humanist, isn't it? When you get past the pirate talk and the noodle jokes.
That's the secret sauce, if you'll pardon the pun.
Yeah.
The ethics are actually quite sound. Be nice to people, don't be a jerk, don't judge people for who they are, don't hoard wealth for the institution.
It's basically secular humanism wrapped in a carbohydrate metaphor.
That's a perfect summary.
So let's talk a bit about the liturgy, the actual practices, the prayers, for instance.
The standard practice, the universal sign-off for any prayer is to end it with ramen.
A portmanteau of amen, and of course, the Japanese noodle dish.
Simple, effective, and delicious.
And the holy days. They have a full liturgical calendar. This isn't just a once-a-year joke.
Don't know, it's a full system. Every Friday is a religious holiday.
Every Friday is the Sabbath.
It is. And the observation basically involves taking it easy and maybe drinking a beer. Relaxing.
Which has to be a very attractive proselytizing tool.
Yeah.
Join our religion. We have 3-day weekends every single week.
It's a strong pitch. Then there's Passover.
A parody of Passover, obviously. And that involves
Eating large amounts of pasta.
Simple enough.
Then you have Ramadan,
A play on Ramadan.
where for a period of time you eat only ramen noodles. It's a time of, well, salty reflection.
Reminiscing about your college days, perhaps.
Exactly. And your personal favorite holiday.
Just holiday.
Just holiday. It happens in late December. It's intentionally vague. It covers Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, the solstice, all of it.
It's a perfect satire, the whole war on Christmas thing, isn't it? You know, people who get so angry if you say, happy holidays.
The Pastafarians just lean right into it. Happy holiday, one holiday to rule them all.
And of course, the big one for the pirate inclined. International talk, like a pirate day.
September 19th. That is a high holy day, a day for costume and specialized speech.
It's just amazing how fleshed out this all became. It started as a single letter, a satirical argument, and suddenly there are rituals, a calendar, a distinct vocabulary.
But then it moved from the digital world, from the internet, into the real world, specifically into the DMV.
Ah, yes. The Department of Motor Vehicles.
This brings us to part 4, symbols of the occult, and specifically the most famous symbol of all, the colander.
This is the visual that I think most people recognize immediately. Someone wearing a pasta strainer on their head. But why? Where did that actually come from? It wasn't in the original letter, was it?
No, it evolved organically from the community, and it really started with one man, an Austrian named Nico Alm. This was a pivotal moment.
Because up until this point, Pastafarianism was largely a digital theoretical thing.
It was, but Alm applied for a driver's license.
And in Austria, like in many countries, you are not allowed to wear any kind of hat or head covering in your official ID photo.
Unless it's for religious reasons.
Right. That's the exemption. The law is designed to accommodate yarmulkes, turbans, hijabs, things like that.
It's a religious accommodation. So Nico Alm shows up to have his photo taken with a plastic colander on his head.
And he argues that he's a Pastafarian, that this is his religious headgear, and under their own law, they have to allow it.
He called their bluff. He forced the state to actually define what religious headgear means, what counts and what doesn't.
He did. And the Austrian authorities, well, they had no idea what to do. They were completely baffled.
They actually made him go for a psychological evaluation.
Just to confirm he was mentally fit to drive a car.
Which feels like a bit of an overreaction for a kitchen utensil, but that's what happened.
And he passed the evaluation.
He did. And eventually, after a long process, they gave in. They let him keep the photo. He got his driver's license with a picture of him wearing a colander.
And that was a massive victory for the movement, wasn't it?
It was huge. It proved that the state couldn't easily distinguish between what it considered real religious headgear and satirical headgear without engaging in religious discrimination.
And that one act sparked a global trend. Suddenly, people were doing this everywhere. We have the case of Lindsay Miller in Massachusetts.
Andrei Filin in Russia. He wore a knitted colander, which I think is technically a beanie, but we'll let it slide.
A holy beanie. And then Mieke de Wilde in the Netherlands. She took her case all the way to the European Court of Human Rights.
She did, though she ultimately lost that one. The court ruled that Pastafarianism wasn't a real religion because it lacked seriousness and cohesion.
Which is a very interesting legal standard, isn't it?
Right.
Who gets to define what is serious?
That's the entire point. Who is the arbiter of seriousness?
The colander became more than a joke. It became a symbol of civil liberties. It's a way of saying, if you get a special privilege in the public square because of your beliefs, then I should get one for mine, no matter how silly my beliefs might look to you.
It perfectly exposes the privilege that we automatically grant to old religions. We accept certain hats because we've been seeing them for centuries.
Right. A bishop's mitre is, objectively speaking, a very strange-looking hat.
Extremely strange. But we respect it because of history and tradition. A colander looks ridiculous because it's new and because we associate it with the kitchen. But functionally, as a symbol of identity and belief, is it actually any different?
It forces the viewer, the bureaucrat, to confront the inherent absurdity of all symbols when you strip them of their historical context.
But as the movement grew and spread, something inevitable happened. Something that happens to every single religion in history.
It fractured.
It fractured.
Like,
Which brings us to part 5. Sects, schisms, and hidden knowledge.
this is where the source material gets really deep into the weeds. Or the seaweed, I suppose, if we're sticking with the pirate theme.
It does. I was genuinely shocked when I started looking at the fandom wiki source for this. The level of detail in these schisms is just incredible.
You think Pastafarianism is one unified thing, but no. Even a self-aware, satirical religion cannot escape human nature.
Just like Christianity has Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, and thousands of other denominations, Pastafarianism has its own sects, and they fight over the tiniest details.
Okay, let's run through a few of the major ones. First up, we have the Moominists.
A fascinating group. They believe that the flying spaghetti monster actually favors Moomins, you know, those Finnish troll characters over pirates.
Okay, that's a big shift from the orthodoxy.
It is, but the biggest theological split is this. They reject the meatball and the sauce.
What? So they're just noodle only?
They are the purists. They worship only the noodle. 99ths of the deity is noodle, is one of their sayings. They view the meatball as a later corruption of the original text.
It's a classic sola scriptura argument, but applied to pasta ingredients.
Exactly. Then you have the linguinists,
The linguinists.
a more radical, some might say ascetic sect. They believe in the chosen linguini. They tend to be more secretive. They prefer blending in rather than wearing the flashy pirate gear. They think all the R and the otta patches are too gaudy and distract from the pure, minimalist perfection of the starch.
And then we have the Spamites.
Chuckles. The Scamites. They are followers of someone called the Scam for Profit.
And their core belief is what?
They believe the deity is not just a flying spaghetti monster. It is spaghetti and pulsar activating meatballs and their ritual vestments.
I'm almost afraid to ask.
Victoria's Secret underwear.
It just keeps getting more specific and more absurd.
But do you see the pattern? It's absurd, but it's mimicking the precise way that real religions fracture over minor doctrinal details.
Right, like is the holy sauce red or white?
And that's a real schism. The Bolognians versus the Carbonarians, there have been holy wars fought online over this.
That sounds like a delicious war, to be honest. I'd happily be a casualty in that conflict.
It does. But it perfectly mirrors real and often bloody historical conflicts over things like whether communion bread should be leavened or unleavened, or the precise nature of the Trinity.
It satirizes that narcissism of small differences. The idea that the most bitter arguments are often with the people most like you.
Precisely. And we have to talk about the afterlife. The Pastafarian concept of heaven and hell is very specific.
Okay, lay it on me. Heaven.
Heaven features a beer volcano,
Which crucially ensures the beer is always cold.
a critical detail. And it also features a stripper factory, though some of the texts are more polite and call it a prostitute factory or just a factory of dancers.
Okay, so beer volcano, stripper factory. Got it. What about hell?
Hell is identical to
It's
heaven.
identical. How's that hell?
Almost identical. There's a catch. In hell, the beer from the volcano is stale and lukewarm.
Ah.
And the strippers all have sexually transmitted diseases.
That is a very descriptive and tactical definition of eternal damnation.
It is. It's not fire and brimstone. It's just eternal disappointment. It's the torment of realizing you almost have paradise, but it's all just slightly horribly ruined.
It's the unintelligent design of the afterlife.
Exactly. It fits the core theology perfectly. Even in the hereafter, things are a little bit flawed.
And there's even deeper lore mentioned in some of the sources, isn't there? Something about an awesome sauce.
Oh yes, the mystical traditions. There's this legend that involves Mexican catacombs and a quest to find the pure, original, awesome sauce.
And what happens if you find it?
It's said that consuming it in its pure form will drive you mad with divine understanding. It reads like an Indiana Jones script written by a very hungry person.
It's just amazing how much mythos has been generated in just a couple of decades. It feels like we're watching a new mythology being built in real time.
That's the whole notebook LM prompt coming to life, isn't it? We're seeing the formation of a lost world, but it's not lost. It's being created right now on Reddit threads and fandom wikis.
It's crowdsourced theology. So we have the myth, the rules, the schisms. But for a religion to become truly official in the eyes of the world, it needs two more things. It needs leaders, and it needs legal recognition, the stamp of the state.
And that's part 6. Initiations, priests, shamans, and legal recognition.
So who are the priests of this movement? Who holds the keys to the sacred kitchen?
Well, technically, anyone can be. You can go online right now and get ordained for a small fee.
And that money goes where?
It usually goes to funding their various legal battles or just maintaining the central website. It's a true priesthood of all believers.
But there are some prominent figures who have emerged, shamans of the movement, if you will. We mentioned Christopher Schaefer earlier.
Right, the town councilman in Pomfret, New York. He was sworn into his elected office while wearing a colander on his head.
Can you just imagine that scene? A government building, you've got the suits, the ties, the American flag, all the solemnity of democracy.
And a man with a pasta strainer on his head is taking a solemn oath to uphold the Constitution.
It's such a powerful, surreal image. It forces you to ask, does the hat make the official? Or does the oath make the official?
And then there's Barrett Fletcher in Alaska.
What did he do?
He was invited to give the opening prayer at a local government assembly. And he opened it with a prayer to the FSM, started it with, "Thy noodle, Lord."
How did that go over?
The sources say some of the other officials just got up and walked out. They couldn't handle it. It caused a huge scene.
But again, that was the entire point, wasn't it?
Of course, Fletcher's point was, you allow Christian prayers here. You allow Jewish prayers. Why not mine? If you open the door to religion and government, you have to open the door to all religion, not just the ones you like.
And we can't forget Rudiger Weide in Germany. He's known as Bruder Spaghettis.
Brother Spaghettis, a fascinating figure. He founded an actual physical church in a town called Templin. He holds noodle worship, or noodle messen, every Friday.
And he fought a legal battle, right?
A long one. For the right to display official church signs at the edge of town, right next to the signs for the Catholic and Protestant churches.
But the biggest breakthrough, the one moment where the state didn't just tolerate it, but actually recognized it, that was in New Zealand.
2015. This is a watershed moment for the entire movement. New Zealand became the first national government to officially recognize the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster for the purpose of performing marriages.
They allowed them to solemnize weddings.
Legally binding weddings. Not just a skit on a beach, real state-recognized marriages.
Tell me about the first one. This feels like a major rite of passage for the whole religion.
It was. The officiant was a woman named Karen Martin, who holds the title of Minestrone.
Minestrone. Perfect.
And she officiated the wedding of a couple named Toby Ricketts and Mariana Fenn.
And where did this historic event take place?
On a pirate ship, naturally. In a harbor.
Of course it was.
The bride and groom were in full pirate regalia. The vows reportedly involved promises to always make pasta for each other and to have plenty of grog on hand.
And the ritual itself, was there a specific Pastafarian element?
There was. Instead of breaking a glass in a Jewish wedding.
Let me guess. They snapped a piece of pasta.
The breaking of the noodles. They snapped a piece of uncooked spaghetti together.
And they exchanged rings.
Rings made of pasta, or pirate-themed rings, depending on the source you read. But the crucial part is the marriage certificate they signed afterward.
It was a real legal document.
A legal document recognized by the crown. If they ever get divorced, they have to go to a real court. Their marriage is as valid as any other.
That is profound. Because at that moment, does it even matter if it all started as a joke? If the state itself says, you are now married in the eyes of the law, under the authority of the flying spaghetti monster, doesn't that make it real?
And that leads us perfectly into our final section, Part 7, Revival the Philosophy of Real Religion.
This is where we get serious. Or as serious as one can get when discussing a saucy deity. Why do courts in the U.S., like that Nebraska ruling or in the Netherlands and Poland, why do they so often reject it? Why do they keep saying, no, this doesn't count?
It nearly always comes down to something called the sincerity test.
The sincerity test.
Right. Courts in secular countries generally don't want to get into the business of judging what you believe. They don't want to be in the position of saying, your God sounds fake, but this other God sounds plausible.
That's a very dangerous road to go down.
A very dangerous road. So instead, they try to judge sincerity. They try to determine if the person genuinely holds the belief.
And with Pastafarianism, they argue that because it's so clearly a parody, it can't possibly be sincerely held.
Exactly. The Nebraska court ruling explicitly called it a satirical parody religion, and on that basis decided it wasn't entitled to legal protection. The judge's logic was, you know this is a joke, therefore you aren't sincere.
But the Pastafarians have a counter-argument to that, and it's actually quite a deep philosophical one. This is the revival aspect of our deep dive today.
It is. They argue for something called religious fictionalism.
Unpack that for us. That sounds pretty academic.
It's the idea that you can participate fully in a religion, the community, the rituals, the ethics, as if it were true, without literally believing in the supernatural elements.
So I don't have to literally believe a giant ball of spaghetti is floating in the room.
Right.
But I can sincerely believe in the community that is formed around that idea. I can sincerely hold the values it promotes.
Precisely. Think about the huge number of cultural Christians or cultural Jews in the world. People who don't literally believe in God, but they still celebrate the holidays, they follow the traditions because it binds them to their family, their history, their people.
Pastafarians are just doing that, but with a much greater degree of self-awareness.
They're doing it consciously. They are saying, we know the myth is a myth, but we sincerely value the community and the ethics that this myth allows us to build.
The sources we looked at mentioned the philosopher Paul Tillich.
Yeah.
How does he fit in?
Tillich talked about the God beyond God. It's this idea that asserting the literal existence of God as a being, like a person in a chair up in the sky, is actually a limitation. It's a form of idolatry that makes God small.
It puts the infinite into a finite box.
Mm-hmm.
Or a colander.
Or a colander, exactly. And so the Pastafarians argue that by openly admitting their God is fictional, they are actually being more honest and perhaps more theologically sophisticated than other religions.
They call it honest religion.
Honest religion. We are the only ones who admit our myths are myths.
And that honesty, they argue, is its own form of supreme sincerity. They are sincere about their community, sincere about their values, and sincere about the purpose of their satire.
It's a really compelling argument when you think about it, and it serves a political function, too. We talked about it being a Trojan horse or a counter-religion.
That's the activist side of it. It's designed to test the system.
It is. If a Christian group can block a sidewalk to preach, or get a tax break for their church, or influence the public school curriculum, the Pastafarian says, me too.
And if the state turns around and says, no, you can't, your religion is silly, the Pastafarian's response is, and who are you to judge what's silly?
Have you read the book of Revelation? There are multi-headed dragons and bowls of wrath. Have you read the story of Jonah living inside a giant fish for 3 days?
It forces the state to admit that it is, in fact, favoring old silliness over new silliness. It exposes the inherent bias in the system.
And we shouldn't forget the charity aspect. We've talked a lot about the satire, but they aren't just trolls.
No, the sources are clear on that. They do a lot of good work. The Kiva microloan fundraising, for example. The sources say they've raised millions of dollars.
They have WWFSMD charity drives What Would Flying Spaghetti Monster Do?
And they help people. They feed people.
Yeah.
Which, for a food-based religion, makes a lot of sense.
It really does, and it all circles back to that fundamental question. If you have a community and a shared code of ethics and rituals that bind you together, and you perform charitable works, what's missing? Just the literal belief in a magic entity.
It blurs the line completely. It suggests that maybe religion is more about what you do together than what you secretly think in your own head.
Precisely. It's about practice, not just belief.
We have covered a lot of ground today, from a satirical letter to a school board in Kansas,
To a legally recognized wedding on a pirate ship in New Zealand.
to the philosophy of Paul Tillich. It has been quite a journey.
A journey across the Noodly Nexus.
Let's try and wrap this up with a final synthesis. We've seen the origins, Bobby Henderson and his brilliant, simple letter. We've seen the rituals, the colanders, the pirate talk, the holy days.
We've seen the sects and schisms, the glorious madness of the Spamites and the Bolognians, and we've seen the legal battles, the ongoing fight for recognition and equality.
It's the story of a modern myth being born right in front of our eyes, a lost world of satire that just refused to stay lost. It's a joke that became real because people needed it to be real to make a point.
And here's the provocative thought I want to leave everyone with today.
Go for it.
We usually think of religion as something that starts with the divine revelation, and then a culture builds up around it. God speaks, and then people gather.
Pipe down.
Pastafarianism did it completely backward. They built the culture first. They created the clothing, the holidays, the community, the legal standing. And the final revelation is that it was all made up to begin with.
But does that make it any less real?
That's the question. If you actually live a Pastafarian life, if you adhere to the "I'd really rather you didn't," if you build community, if you use satire to challenge authority, if you wear the colander with pride, does it really matter that the God at the center of it is made of pasta?
At what point does the fake become real, simply through the sheer act of living it as if it were?
That's the mystery. Maybe the noodly appendage is real after all. Not as a physical thing touching atoms, but as a social force. A force that binds a community together.
A force for chaos.
And carbs.
And carbs. Always carbs.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the noodly nexus.
It's been a true pleasure.
We will see you next time. Until then, may you be touched by his noodly appendage.
Ramen.
Thanks for tuning into Sonara's Deep Dive. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our future episodes. I bring you fresh content every week. Thanks for listening.